You're his lawyer. Defend him. Your Honor, my client was frozen for unknown amount of time being experimented on by this secret agency known as Sector 7. He clearly suffered temporary insanity, and on top of that he's a ruler of another world political system. This means the US government has been torturing a foreign nation citizen and its ruler. That an act of war against the deceptions. We acted first. This is actually the best defense of Meg Zelva ever fucking heard. If I could give you an award, I would. Second argument. The crimes my client allegedly committed was against the USA. I assume we are going by its justice system. As such, my client has the right to be judged by a jury of his peers. Given there are no known unbiased Cybertronians on Earth for this jury, I proclaim this case is a mistrial. Any other crimes he may have committed were allegedly on Cybertron. So outside of any Earth's government jurisdiction. Your Honor, I want to point out 3 facts about my client. First and foremost, he was born into a repressive caste system as something that we would consider a mere slave. Can you really judge him for actions against an oppressive regime he rebelled against? I doubt so. My client only seeked for the strength to change an unfair and, I want to point that out clearly, unjust system. Would anyone here in the court punish a slave to break the chains and rise up against the oppression? Secondly, but not less important, my client, after crash landing onto Earth, was not met with any respect or dignity and instead kept frozen and used for unknown amounts of experiments on him by a secret agency over a multiple span of years. Due to this abuse, under his consciousness, nonetheless, he suffered mentally and physical scars. In other words, my client is without any doubt a victim of torture by an organization under direction of the US government. And last but not least, as a foreigner and specifically an extraterrestrial being, my client was not aware of human laws and jurisdiction. In fact, as the highest ranking leader of a different planet, my client should clearly be protected by political immunity, and yet, as I already pointed out, was instead abused over decades by the government. This is nothing short of an act of cruelty and unjust. And wouldn't it be not for the mercy and kindness of Lord Megatron, some would see such an act as one of war. Your Honor and the jury, you clearly have to see that my client is not a criminal but instead a victim and solely acted in self-defense and preservation. Your Honor, my client has already died at the hands of Optimus and is still dealing with the trauma, so I'll ask the judge of this courtroom for a case dismissal. Your Honor, my client pleads nah. The fuck you mean nah? Silence, puny human. Nah. Your Honor, my client was willing to do whatever it took, including harvesting our solar system's sun, to keep his friends and family alive. Wouldn't you say that is one of the noblest of causes? To be seen as a mass murderer and hold that title with pride, knowing that your loved ones, will survive? Your Honor, my client Megatronus II was promised the status of a prime. All of his actions were done under a false promise by his namesake, Megatronus Prime, who by now I understand goes by the Fallen. Fuck it, I better call Saul. Your Honor, my client claims oopsie daisy. Your Honor, the Earth is Unicron and thereby must be destroyed. The largest military on Earth has been taken over by a lunatic who wants a space empire under the guise of freedom and peace. My client just wants to stop this galactic imperialism and extinguish the evil in and on this vile planet. Given when my client landed on Earth, he was taken hostage and studied, then released only to be killed by the Autobots. There was absolutely no chance for negotiation. The Autobots had already convinced the military of their nefarious intentions before my client was even released from his glacial prison. Yet, in the subsequent events, after the death of the Fallen, who was one of my client's only avenues for a solution to Cybertron's energon crisis at the time, I may add, my client arranged deals with several humans groups of Earth for cooperation. It was only because of the Autobots did conflict arise. Megatron and by extension, the Decepticons, have been unfairly prosecuted since their arrival and despite attempting cooperation, have been rejected at every turn. I honestly find their patience with humanity quite admirable. Your Honor, this is just standard behavior for a Cybertronian. Your Honor, all hail Megatron. My Honor, my client has been the product of a witch hunt. The Autobot leader Optimus Prime, who is the worst prime in the history of Cybertron, stole the matrix of leadership from him. He rightfully won the matrix. The lying Autobots know this. They rigged it. Obtuse Optimus, the worst prime ever, lead our planet into war, where Megatron tried to be peaceful. He the most peaceful Cybertronian ever. Your Honor, my client is batshit insane. Your Honor, he was surrounded by gaseous sycophants. Your Honor, you weren't even there. Well, he was frozen in ice for the last 10,000 years or so. Pretty sure that would count as time served. You win. He is a sovereign citizen from another planet who suffers from clear insanity and was frozen for a good few thousand years. He was experimented on unlawfully by Sector 7's personnel and repeatedly has been threatened with death. He was also acting on the interests of his people. On top of that, we stole a highly valuable artifact from him and his people and refused to relinquish it, therefore making us guilty of unlawful imprisonment, unethical experimentation, attempted homicide and grand larceny. To add even more insult to injury, we tore his and his people's remains apart without their consent and manufactured deadly weapons that were the cause of mass property destruction and causalities in Hong Kong. See the Age of Extinction incident of 2014 involving the resurrected Megatron, briefly known as Galvatron. We also worked with a bounty hunter who further contributed to this, making us guilty of conspiring with a hostile foreign entity and illegal weapons manufacturing. He was born into a highly oppressive caste system and organized a rebellion to break free. Can we blame a slave for wanting to be free of their chains? He was also, let me make this very clear, a foreign citizen. He had no concept of human laws and broke them without knowing. Therefore, we have committed an act of war against a mentally unwell sovereign citizen and the Deceptions, who are on the brink of extinction, which by extension means we have committed an act of war against Cybertron in its entirety. We struck the first blow and he retaliated accordingly. Also, he turns into a giant jet flying tank Mad Max truck unkillable lorry and has a laser gun for a hand. Need I say more? Your Honor, my client, Megatron, comes from a dying planet, a world of metal and machine teetering on the edge of annihilation. Cybertron, a once glorious civilization, faced ruin, its resources depleted, its population dwindling, its sparks extinguished one by one in the cold void of the cosmos. And in this darkest hour, it was Megatron who stood tall, unwilling to let his people wither into extinction. What you see before you is not a villain, but a leader driven by desperation. Megatron did not seek conquest for the sake of power. No, his mission was survival. The Autobots, led by the reckless and inexperienced Optimus Prime, denied the Deceptions their right to live, to find a new way, to secure a future. Every step Optimus took was one in opposition to progress, a refusal to see the greater good that Megatron offered. Is it truly a crime, Your Honor, to fight for the survival of one's race? To take up arms when the very existence of your people is at stake? Megatron was left with no choice. His actions, though forceful, were driven by the knowledge that peace, under the Autobots' idealism, was nothing but a slow death sentence for the Decepticons. Negotiation had failed. Compassion had failed. When faced with annihilation, should a leader not fight back with everything at his disposal? Your Honor, I urge you to see beyond the chaos of war, beyond the propaganda of the Autobots, and recognize Megatron for what he is, a savior. It is not power he sought, but survival. Would you not defend your people, your home, if left with no other option? The blame does not lie with Megatron alone. It lies in the failed leadership of Optimus Prime, in the rigid dogma that refused to acknowledge the Deception's plight. My client stands accused of war crimes, but what is war when it is the only path to survival? What is violence when peace is no longer an option? I ask you, Your Honor, to deliver justice, not as a blind instrument of the victor's history, but with the clarity and compassion that my client so desperately sought for his people. Megatron did what he believed was necessary to save his kind. That is not villainy. That is the burden of leadership. Your Honor, what exactly has my client done wrong? It was not he who launched the Allspark into the cosmos. No, Your Honor, he was only trying to hold his planet, his people together. Was it really peace through tyranny? Or was it simply the Autobots were dangerous radicals and terrorists? It was not my client or his supporters who plunged their world into a dark age. As to his desperate attempt to survive and escape from a dangerous, hostile alien world, a world that held him prisoner, whose dominant species imprisoned and experimenting on him. Who could blame him? And the unfortunate situation with Jazz, I mean Autobot Jazz, who attacked him, and my client was within his rights to defend himself. Only to have a human who had been manipulated into working with the Autobots destroy the only hope for their world by savagely assaulting my client. What are the charges but merely the outcome of one brave bot trying to survive? Your Honor, my client was kept as an experiment subject for decades and has suffered mentally and physically, which has heavily affected his choices. He has not once attacked and provoked, and every action taken against him has been an act of war started by humanity. The battle in Mission City, while unfortunate, was not caused solely by our client. He was simply retrieving an artifact to rebuild his world that was stolen by a terror group called the Autobots that have undermined his rule and destroyed their home world and their misled human collaborators. Your Honor, he's just a silly goose and pranked everyone he knew and loved. He's also a giant robot from another world that is not a citizen of any nation of Earth. Therefore, he should not be prosecuted by any Earth government but by the Cybertronian government. I rest my case. Your Honor, my client is far too badass to be found guilty. Just look at that face. That's the face of man to call for prison. Give him the chair. Your Honor, my client was frozen for well over a century, an immigrant from an alien planet, and what is done to him? He is tortured by us. A secret agency set up by the government to torture themselves innocent creatures. If anything, they should be on trial. Your Honor, based on ancient Cybertronian law, my client demands that this trial be overseen by the Knights of Cybertron. We request that he be allowed to join a gang of scrappy troublemaking screw-ups on a quest throughout the galaxy in search of these knights. What? It worked for the other one. Ladies and gentlemen, let's set the record straight. My client, Megatron, leader of the Deceptions, is simply a misunderstood individual. Sure, he's caused a bit of a ruckus here and there, but who hasn't tried to conquer the universe at least once in their lifetime? His actions are merely a case of extreme ambition. Very extreme. Let's not make a habit of making goal-oriented people bad guys. That's not good for our youth to think that their dreams can be crushed because society does not agree with them and want to hello them achieve their dreams. After all, is he really that different from a toddler with a box of toys? He just wants to be in charge of the whole sandbox. If you think about it, Megatron is simply taking dreaming big. If anything, Optimus caused the war. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client, Megatron, is simply a misunderstood revolutionary. You see, we often celebrate historical figures for their bold attempts to challenge oppressive regimes, and Megatron is no different. He sought freedom for his people, the Decepticons, who were systematically oppressed under Autobot rule. Sure, the destruction of entire cities may seem excessive to some, but we must ask ourselves, can we truly judge an intergalactic freedom fighter by Earth's pedestrian laws? Furthermore, the Autobots have literally been at war with Megatron for millennia. Are we really going to sit here and pretend the damage wasn't mutual? My client has also repeatedly offered non-violent negotiations, even if they were punctuated with phrases like "bow before your lord and master." It's all semantics, folks. Lastly, let's talk about my client's contributions to technology. That fusion cannon on his arm? Innovation. His leadership of Cybertron? Impeccable. Without Megatron, Cybertron's economy would have fallen to ruin. I ask the jury to see Megatron not as a villain, but as a bold entrepreneur, a visionary leader, and a product of his environment. Also, let's face it, who among us wouldn't want to transform into a killer jet once in a while? Your Honor, why don't you let my client speak his case? I am not crazy. I am not crazy. I know he swapped those numbers L knew when it way back when I was D16. One after Megatron Carter, as if I could make such a mistake. Never, I just couldn't prove it. He covered his tire tracks. He got that vermin from Earth to life for him. You think this is something? You think this is bad? This chicanery? He's done worse. The cube, are you telling me that a legendary artifact just happens to be sent into space like that? No. He orchestrated it, Orion. He defecated through a sunroof. And I saved him. And I shouldn't have. I took him into my own faction. What was I thinking? He'll never change. He'll never change. Ever since he was a protoform, always the same. Couldn't keep his mighty hands of steel out of the Energon drawer. But not our Orion. Couldn't be precious Orion. Lying straight to their faces. And he gets to be a prime? What a sick joke. I should have stopped him when I had the chance. And you have to stop him. You. Your Honor, he is sexy.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass on.